She stood by the back exit of the dimly lit café, her heart racing as the rain drummed softly on the roof above. It was a quiet corner of town, but tonight every shadow felt heavy with secrets. Emily breathed in the smell of coffee and warm pastries, trying to drown out the anxiety swirling in her mind. She was here for only one reason: to deliver a message. As she glanced toward the door, she saw him coming. Mark was tall and lean, with dark hair that fell into his eyes. He moved with purpose, his brow slightly furrowed as he surveyed the room. There was something about him that drew people in, his intense gaze and the way he carried himself. But tonight she could see the tension in his shoulders, the way he clenched his fists against the chill in the air. "Emily," he whispered when he reached her. She nodded, pulling a folded piece of paper from her pocket. The words dripped from her lips, as heavy as the air around them. With a quick glance over his shoulder, Mark took the message, his eyes darting around the cafe. He seemed on edge more than usual. It was as if he feared the walls themselves might be listening. His voice was low, almost pleading. Emily hesitated, feeling the weight of their situation. "I swear it's all I could find." Suddenly, Mark stepped back, retreating into the shadows of the doorway. Emily's heart raced even faster now. She asked, nearly whispering. Before he could answer, a loud ring pierced through the quiet atmosphere. In surprise, Emily fumbled for her phone. She felt her stomach drop when she saw the caller ID. It was him. "Answer it," Mark urged, his eyes wide. The urgency in his voice sent a shiver down her spine. Taking a deep breath, Emily swiped the screen to answer, holding the phone to her ear. "Emily," came the smooth voice on the other end. It sent chills through her, but there was a confident assurance in his tone that made her feel uncertain. "Why, yes," she stammered, casting a quick glance at Mark, who was inching closer, trying to listen in. "Good, now listen carefully. I need you to move through the back exit and into the alley." He felt the pulse of fear quicken in her veins. Mark mouthed the word "go" even as uncertainty gripped her. She took a step toward the exit, glancing back at him. Without thinking, she pointed toward the back door, knowing he'd understand. As she slipped through the door and into the dark alley, the cold air hit her like a slap. She hurried down the narrow passage, heart pounding louder with each step. She could hear the distant sounds of cars passing by and the occasional splatter of raindrops hitting the concrete. "Stay where you are," the voice crackled through the phone again. Emily glanced around, straining her eyes to make out her surroundings. The alley was littered with trash bins and flickering lights overhead. "There's nothing here. Good, just be patient." She clenched her fists, leaning against the damp brick wall. Waiting in the dark felt unbearable. It was a mix of fear and anticipation. Was this right? Was she doing the right thing? Then came the sound of footsteps. Emily's breath caught in her throat. They were heavy, purposeful, and they were getting closer. Mark's voice broke through the crackle of the line, panic lacing his words. "I think someone's coming," she said, her voice barely a whisper. "Get ready to run." Before she could respond, two figures stepped into the alley, their faces illuminated by the faint light from the cafe. She recognized one instantly, coming straight toward her. It was David, Mark's rival, his face a mask of anger. Her body went rigid. She stumbled over her words, her mind racing. He barked. Emily's heart dropped, but the lie felt weak and she could see the anger flashing in David's eyes. "You think I believe you?" She felt the urge to run, but she stood frozen, trying to recall the instructions from the voice on the other end of the line. Mark's voice echoed in her ear, barely audible. "They found me," she said quickly. "I need, run." His command jolted her into action. Heart racing, she pushed off the wall and sprinted past David and his companion, who were momentarily stunned by her sudden movement. She could hear them shouting behind her, the footsteps thundering close. The alley opened up to a main street, bright lights flooding her vision. Cars whizzed by, honking as she stumbled onto the pavement, dodging the streaming headlights. Mark's voice was urgent, frantic. "Head to the staircase on your left." Nerve and fear propelled her forward, adrenaline coursing through her veins. She took a sharp left, spotting the staircase leading up to a bridge above. "I'm going," she panted, eyes searching the street behind her. "Don't stop." As she hit the stairs, her legs burned. The air felt sharp in her lungs, but she pushed herself, one foot in front of the other. She could hear their voices booming from behind, scrambling after her. David roared, rage in his tone. Emily reached the top of the stairs, gasping for breath. She turned to see Mark waiting on the opposite side of the bridge, his face etched with worry. Behind him, shadows crept closer and her heart thudded wildly against her chest. He shouted, gesturing for her to cross. She took a deep breath and dashed across the bridge, focused on getting to him. Panic and adrenaline fueled her, blurring her vision. As she reached him, she felt the rush of safety wash over her, yet it was fleeting. Mark urged, grabbing her hand and pulling her into an alley at the other end of the bridge. Heart hammering, she turned to look back as they ducked into shadows. She searched for any sign of David, but in the chaos, everything felt like a blur. Mark asked, breathing hard. Stammered, trembling from the rush. Mark gripped her hand tighter, leading her deeper into the darkening streets. They moved quickly, the sounds of their pursuers fading, but she could still hear her heartbeat thumping loudly in her ears. His voice was sharp but urgent. She nodded. "The warehouse, he can't be serious," she said, fire igniting in her belly. Mark stopped, turning to face her. There was fear in his eyes, but it was mixed with something else, determination. He asked, his voice low, "Yes." He nodded, the tension between them thick. They moved again, slipping down alleyways and behind buildings, careful to keep out of sight. The moon peeked through the clouds, casting an eerie glow on the pavement as they arrived at the warehouse. It was old and worn, filled with forgotten memories and shadows of the past. They moved cautiously toward the entrance, the heavy door creaking as they pushed it open. Inside it was dark, but a faint light flickered somewhere deep within. The air was stale, filled with dust and neglect. Emily could feel her pulse quicken again. The anticipation mixed with fear was almost overwhelming. Mark whispered, scanning the large, empty room. "I don't know," she replied, her eyes darting toward the shadows. Suddenly, the flickering light grew stronger, illuminating a figure in the corner of the room. The voice on the phone. "Good, you made it," he said, his voice smooth and calm. Mark demanded, stepping forward. "We need to be quick." The man's eyes glimmered with intensity. "Emily, you did well finding that file," she asked, her heart still racing. He smirked, a distant look in his eyes, to a place where answers lie. Mark turned to Emily, confusion shadowing his face. She took a step closer to Mark, feeling the warmth of his presence. She paused, looking deep into his eyes. And as they stood in the dim light of that old warehouse, uncertainty crackled in the air, but they would face it together. Whatever lay ahead, they would fight their way through. Together they had made it this far, and together they would confront the path that stretched out before them. The tension hung heavy, but beneath that weight there was something else, hope. And in that moment, Emily knew they would find a way forward. The cafe was buzzing with chatter, filled with the rich aroma of coffee and baked goods, but Claire felt like she was drowning in silence. She sat by the window, heart racing, gripping her phone tightly. She knew what she had to do, but her mind was in turmoil. Suddenly, her gaze fixed on the front door. A figure stepped in, Jack. He blended into the crowd, but there was an edge to his demeanor, a sense of urgency that sent a jolt through her. Her breath caught in her throat as she locked eyes with him. With a quick glance over his shoulder, Jack moved toward the back of the cafe, his purpose evident. Claire's heart thumped louder, threatening to break free from her chest. She instinctively raised her hand, pointing toward the back exit, her eyes wide with urgency. She mouthed, her throat dry as sandpaper. Without hesitation, Jack slipped through the narrow doorway just as the cafe door swung open again, letting in a gust of chilly air. Claire turned, and a wave of fear washed over her as she saw a tall figure enter, his face mere inches from hers. It was Tony, Jack's longtime enemy, a man known for his ruthless reputation. She quickly glanced back at the exit, knowing Jack needed to escape. "Don't look at me," she whispered to herself, steeling her nerve. But then her phone rang, the screen lighting up with Jack's name, breaking the tension hanging in the air. The world around her faded, and she answered, her voice a trembling whisper. "Claire, listen closely. I'm near the back exit." Her heart plummeted. "I know. Point the way. Stay calm," Jack instructed, his voice firm but edged with urgency. Claire's eyes darted between Jack's retreating figure and Tony, who was scanning the cafe, growing impatient. "He's in the cafe," hissed, even as she focused on Jack, willing him to go faster. Jack asked, his tone steady amidst the chaos. "Near the windows, I can see you," she said, trying to steady her voice. Turning back to Tony, Claire felt her palms sweat. Sweat dripped down her back as she watched him move toward the waitstaff station, likely looking for any response to his looming presence, his eyes darting around like a predator. It felt like time had slowed. "Claire," Jack's voice broke through her thoughts, cutting through the panic. She quickly scanned the cafe. "Okay, there's the dumpster to your left." A few steps past that, his sudden laughter erupted from Tony, filling the silence. "You think you can hide from me, Jack?" Bile rose in Claire's throat. She couldn't let him hear Jack, she said, trying to sound brave, though fear gripped her heart. He snapped, his voice low and dangerous. Jack's voice broke her concentration. She swiped back to the call, heart racing. "Just guide me," he insisted, his voice a strong anchor in the storm swirling around her. "Okay, move left past the coffee machine. You'll see the door to the alley just a few feet ahead." Claire's breath stalled as she watched Jack inch closer to the exit. Would he make it? Suddenly, Tony moved toward the back, and Claire felt the air in the room shift. He called out, a dangerous smirk playing on his lips. Claire felt panic swell again. "Stay calm, you're doing great," Jack urged, his voice a steady rhythm against her racing heart. "I can't see," he said. "Just a few more steps." Then she saw it, a flicker of movement in the corner of her eye. Tony. He was right there, watching, his eyes narrowed on Jack, who was only a few paces from the exit. She yelled, her voice loud enough to turn heads, but Tony was already there, a shadow creeping in. Claire's heart dropped, a dreadful realization hitting her. Jack's voice was filled with urgency. Clenching her fists, Claire fought the urge to shout her fears. Claire's phone buzzed in her hand, illuminating the dark space. It was an incoming message, an alert from Jack reading, "I can't see." She shouted into the phone, "Jack, curse it." Before Claire could respond, she saw Tony take a step toward the back exit, his face twisted in cruel anticipation. He taunted loud enough for everyone to hear. "Run, Jack." Her voice was raw with desperation. Jack didn't hesitate. He launched himself toward the exit, barreling through the doorway as Tony shouted behind him. The door banged against the wall, and in that split second, Claire knew everything could unravel. She bolted upright, her heart thumping. She searched for him, both Jack and Tony trying to catch a glimpse of how it all would unfold. The cafe buzzed with confusion, patrons looking up as the scene unfolded, but Claire's attention was split between the two men. Tony's mocking voice cut through the chaos. Claire's blood turned cold. She focused back on her phone, gripping it tighter as Jack's fearful breath echoed in her ear. He gasped. "Back exit," she instructed, her mind racing. "Wait for me," he panted. Claire's pulse surged as she sprinted toward the door. She couldn't stay in the cafe. The walls felt like they were closing in. "You're almost there, Jack." The sounds of confusion and shouts filled the air behind her, but she focused only on Jack, willing him to make it. Each heartbeat felt as though it could drown her in fear. She shouted into the phone, trying to guide him like a beacon. In the shadows of the alley, Jack's figure appeared, his breath heavy. He looked lost and desperate. Claire yelled, urgency pushing her. Jack turned, eyes wide as Tony's voice escalated behind him. He took off, a blur of hesitation turning into raw speed. Claire couldn't contain her anxiety. She could hear the distance between them crumbling. Jack was close, but Tony was even closer. Jack's voice crackled through the phone. Claire shouted fiercely, almost pleading, "Trust me. Wait, what if I'll protect you." Just then, Jack swerved tight through the alley, his foot catching on something. He stumbled, but quickly regained his balance. She urged, her voice rising in panic. Jack scrambled past the twisted metal of an old dumpster, and Claire knew he was right there, almost free. She yelled, desperation taking hold again. "You're almost free," he panted. But as he reached the end of the alley, a loud crash echoed around them. It was Tony, furious and relentless, charging down the alley, darkness surrounding him. Claire's heart felt like it might explode. Finally, they reached the intersection, freedom almost in sight. Jack turned right, glancing back just as Tony drew nearer. Jack's voice faltered, a hint of despair creeping in. "Don't stop." Gathering every ounce of strength, Jack pushed forward, sprinting into the street, turning to face the oncoming traffic. Cars sped by, disruption swirling in the chaotic dance around him, but Claire felt the air shift. He was past the danger. She cried with triumph, feeling relief wash over her. Jack's voice trembled with uncertainty. Head for the park. She could see the fear in his eyes glowing even through the phone screen, but Claire steadied her breath. "You can do this," she assured him, empowerment seedling between them in that tense moment. "We'll meet." With a nod, Jack turned and sprinted again, disappearing into the night as Claire watched, heart soaring yet heavy with lingering worry. Still gripped with adrenaline, she stepped out of the cafe and moved toward the street, her mind racing. She had to get to the park before Tony realized where Jack had gone. "Don't let them catch you, Jack," she whispered to herself, the weight of the world resting on her slim shoulders. The night air was electric as she ran, her heart pounding with the rhythm of a chase that had just begun. She was ready to fight for Jack, their bond now stronger than ever, and whatever lay ahead, she was ready to face it head-on. As she raced through the shadows of the streetlight, Claire felt alive with purpose. She pressed forward, ready to secure their future, knowing they were meant to outlast the darkness that chased them. Together, they would step into the light. The rain poured down heavily, drowning out the noise of the bustling city. It was late afternoon, and the streets glistened with puddles that caught the reflections of neon signs like scattered jewels. Inside the dimly lit cafe, the aroma of coffee and baked pastries hung thick in the air, creating a sense of warmth and comfort. All of that felt worlds away from the chaos unfolding just beyond the cafe's doors. Claire sat nervously at a corner table, her fingers tapping on the wooden surface. She glanced at the clock on the wall. Each tick seemed to echo her rising anxiety. 10 minutes since he was supposed to arrive, and the more she waited, the more the weight of her worries pressed down on her chest. Suddenly, the bell above the cafe door jingled, slicing through her thoughts. A figure entered, shadows clinging to him as he stepped inside, rain-soaked and resolute. It was Jake. His usual easy smile was replaced by a look of urgency that sent a jolt through Claire. Quickly, she immersed herself in the scene, her heart racing. Jake scanned the room, anxiety evident in his posture. Spotting her, he quickly made his way through the tables, his movements sharp and focused. As he approached, Claire noticed the tension in his fists, the determination in his gaze. Something wasn't right. He asked, voice low, barely masking the urgency. Claire nodded, her throat dry. "Yes, but we need to be quick." Before she could explain, the cafe door swung open once more, causing the warmth inside to seep away just a little. In walked Tony, a man whose mere presence shifted the atmosphere in the room. He was known for his cold demeanor, his reputation preceding him like a dark cloud. Claire felt her breath hitch. Tony's voice boomed across the cafe. The cheerfulness that surrounded them moments before dissolved into a chilling silence. Eyes turned in Tony's direction, and Claire felt the tension knot in her stomach. Jake turned sharply, acknowledging Tony with a mix of fear and defiance. "Funny seeing you here," Tony sneered, taking a few steps closer. That was enough for Claire. Instinct kicked in as she pointed toward the back exit, her eyes wide with urgency. He didn't hesitate. Feet propelled him toward the door, but deep down, Claire knew it wasn't going to be that easy. Tony's gaze never left Jake, fueled by some unseen desperation and fury. Tony's voice rang out more menacing now. Claire grabbed her phone, heart pounding. In a moment like this, she needed to take charge. As Jake reached the back exit, she quickly lifted her phone, scrolling through to find his contact, praying he had signal in the chaos. The moment the call connected, she whispered, "Jake, you need to hurry." Jake's breath came out in rapid bursts. She urged, gripping her phone tighter as if it could somehow bridge the distance between them. She watched as Jake hesitated. Claire could feel every ounce of tension in the air, the atmosphere thickening like smoke. In that moment, time slowed. She wanted to scream at him to keep running, to just get to safety. But just as Jake was about to comply, the cafe door swung open again, the sound like a gunshot in the tense air. It was too late. Tony had seen him too, and with every ounce of power he had, he surged forward, closing the distance between them. Claire shouted, her voice raw with fear. Jake bolted, bursting through the back door and into the rain-soaked alley, panic driving his every movement. Claire's heart raced as she saw him disappear from sight, running toward freedom but still in danger. She turned back to watch Tony storm through the cafe, a predator tasting freedom for just a moment too late. Tony shouted, his voice rumbling like thunder. Claire knew she had to act fast. She yelled, hoping to stall him even for a second. Inside, her heart raced. Time was a fragile thread weaving between life and danger. As if sensing what would happen next, she felt her phone vibrate in her pocket, the sudden jolt bringing everything back into focus. It was a text from Jake. She replied, quick as lightning. Head to the alley, praying she wasn't too late. Claire pushed her way through the crowd, weaving through tables, her pulse pounding against her eardrums. As she reached the doorway, she caught a glimpse of Jake, his silhouette fading further into the misty night. But she also saw Tony storming out the back exit, a predator now unleashed. Claire whispered, steeling herself for what she had to do. Jake, listen, she whispered into her phone, trying to keep her voice steady. You need to turn left and keep running. I can't see anything. Jake's panic was palpable, echoing through the line. Claire took a deep breath, her heart racing faster than ever. There's a dumpster on your left. Got it. Adrenaline coursed through her veins as she watched Jake sprint past the dumpster, glancing back just as Tony roared into the alley. The calm in Claire shattered as she quickly scanned the shadows and clutter around her. She instructed, feeling the walls pressing in around her. It's only a few more steps, Jake gasped, desperation creeping in again. She urged, her voice shaking. Tony burst into the alley, eyes blazing with fury. He shouted, making the shadows seem darker. Fear gripped Claire once again as she bit her lip, catching her breath even as her heart pounded in rhythm with Jake's escalating footsteps. I'm here. Jake rounded the corner into the street, but Claire noticed Tony wasn't far behind. They're right on you, keep going. Head down to the park, there's a fountain. As Jake sprinted toward the park, Claire's heart raced with uncertainty. Every moment felt eternal as she fought the urge to run after him. But she knew if she did, she'd only create more chaos. Jake's voice crackled through the phone, desperation rising. Just trust me, she said, willing him to push through the fear a little longer. He yelled, panic drowning the courage she knew he had. Claire heard shuffling, the sounds of footsteps echoing in the distance. You have to get out of there, she said, her throat tightening. Please, Jake. Suddenly a raucous laugh erupted from Tony, chilling her to the bone. Claire's stomach dropped. He's close, Jake shouted, breathless, just a little further. In that moment, Claire pushed through the crowded streets, weaving back toward the park. The lights grew brighter, signaling that safety was near, but Tony was relentless. Claire could feel the tension rising, her heart thundering as she sprinted dangerously close to where Jake would emerge. She urged, keeping her eyes forward, trying to imagine what he could see. Yes, it's just ahead. As Jake neared the park entrance, Claire's heart soared as she realized she could finally see him. He emerged from the darkness, wild-eyed and fearfully glancing over his shoulder, but the urgency in his movements finally made his path clear. He called out desperately. There, she shouted, waving her arms like a flag. But just as he reached her, Tony rounded the corner, eyes blazing with fury, and Claire could hear every violent breath rattle through his chest. It was too close, too imminent. She screamed, instinctively placing herself in front of Jake. Tony laughed mockingly. Without thinking, Claire pushed Jake behind her, determination fueling her every move. He stepped closer, his demeanor a mix of amusement and rage. It was as if time slowed to a crawl in that moment. The world faded away, leaving only the desperate need to safeguard everything they had. Claire felt an unexpected calm wash over her. Listen, she said, her voice steady despite the intensity. Leave him alone. Tony's eyes narrowed, measuring her words like a snake preparing to strike. Drawing on every ounce of courage, she took a step forward, refusing to back down. You want me, then let him go. There's nothing between you and him. The laughter stopped abruptly. I'm not afraid of you, she declared, her heart racing but her voice unyielding. The tension hung heavy in the air, a taut string ready to snap. Jake peeked around her, eyes wide with fear but filled with admiration for her courage. He breathed, confusion etched on his face. Without breaking eye contact with Tony, Claire turned slightly. Go, Jake. In that split second, Jake seemed to awaken. He grasped her hand, feeling the strength radiating from her. It was the trust they had built over time, the connection that held them together in this chaotic moment. Claire commanded, the urgency in her voice cutting through the thick atmosphere. In unison, they turned and sprinted toward the fountain, the cascading water sparkling in the distant lights. Footsteps echoed behind them, but they pressed forward, determination fueling every stride. They burst through the path, mud splattering beneath their feet, the sound of their breaths mingling with the splashes of water. Claire could feel the adrenaline pumping through her veins, igniting her spirit while fear hung on the edges. They reached the fountain, breathless and desperate. Claire turned, catching sight of Tony a few paces behind them. The shadows danced around him, but they weren't afraid anymore. She shouted, releasing Jake's hand as she braced for what was coming. For a moment they stood together, Jake's pulse matching Claire's. He urged, locking eyes with her, and together they broke free into the night, propelling themselves toward safety with one shared goal, to leave the danger behind. As they sprinted toward the heart of the park, the darkness faded behind them, the chase losing its power. They found solace in the embrace of the trees, where whispers of the wind guided them toward a new beginning. In that moment, Claire felt as though they had not only outrun their fears, but transformed into something stronger. Their bond pulled them away from the shadows and into the light, where laughter mixed with the night air, and the sounds of their racing hearts became a rhythm for change. Together, they were unstoppable. And as they made their way through the darkness, she realized it wasn't just about escaping Tony. It was about embracing their strength, their courage, and their unwavering trust in each other. They had faced down the storm, and now, side by side, they were ready to take on whatever came next. The cafe was bustling, yet in that moment, it felt like the world around her faded to quiet. Sarah sat at a small table in the corner, her heart racing like a hummingbird's wings. The clinks of coffee cups and low conversations buzzed along, but all that filled her mind was the looming danger that had brought her here tonight. Across the cafe, she saw him, Michael. He was supposed to be here, and yet he had taken longer than expected. Panic twisted in her stomach. She knew time was running out. Suddenly, the door swung open, and in came a gust of wind that swept through the cafe like an uninvited guest. Michael stepped inside, dripping from the rain, urgency etched on his face. He locked eyes with Sarah, and in that instant, she knew he had felt that something was very wrong. He whispered, moving to her side, his eyes darting around nervously. She nodded, her fingers trembling slightly as she pulled a small envelope from her bag, her heart racing even faster. But we need to go now. Just as she handed him the envelope, the cafe door flung open again, and a menacing figure stepped inside. It was Lamont, a man known for his aggressive demeanor and even more violent tendencies. A wave of dread crashed over her. She whispered, her voice barely a breath. Michael turned slowly, his face going pale as he recognized the man now watching them. "See him, let's back." Before he could finish, Lamont spotted them. He sneered, stalking closer, each step heavy with malice. Sarah's instinct screamed at her to run, but she stood frozen, adrenaline flooding her system. She glanced at the back exit, catching Michael's eye, and then without thinking she pointed toward it. The back, Michael nodded, but it was as if time slowed. She urged, her voice sharp and commanding. He pivoted and dashed toward the back, but in a heartbeat, Lamont was right behind him. The cafe erupted in chaos as people turned to see the drama unfolding. "Hey," Lamont shouted, his voice booming over the startled chatter. Sarah yelled into her phone, Sarah's heart pounding as she pressed the device to her ear. In that split second of chaos, she felt something shift in the air. She had to keep control, she had to protect him. As Michael reached the exit, he hesitated, looking back to catch Sarah's eye one last time. His voice trembled, "Just go." She called, forcing herself to sound braver than she felt. With a final glance, he slipped through the door just as Lamont stormed forward, eyes blazing with fury for the escapee. Then Sarah's phone rang, a sharp sound cutting through the tension. Michael was calling her as he ran. His voice buzzed through the line, filled with panic. "I don't know where to go," she said firmly, ignoring the shock of fear in her chest. "You need to take a right as soon as you're out of the alley. There's a small gate that leads to the park." "I can try. I'm fine." She could hear his breathing, quick and frantic, and it fueled her own heart's rhythm. "Don't look back." She hung up and rushed to the back door, peering into the alley. It was dimly lit, shadows weaving through dark corners. She could hear the rain, now softer but persistent, wrapping around her like a cloak of urgency. Lamont's voice boomed from inside the cafe. Fear shot through her, but Sarah's resolve hardened. She wasn't going to let Michael face this alone. She stepped out into the alley, adrenaline surging as she scanned the darkness for any sign of him. She yelled, her voice sharp against the rain. Just then her phone buzzed again. It was a message. "I'm by the gate." A wave of relief washed over her, but it was fleeting. The danger wasn't over yet. She texted back quickly, stepping deeper into the shadows of the alley. The air turned electric with fear as she moved cautiously, each step a thud against her racing heart. She pushed herself forward, urgency driving her, when suddenly the sound of heavy footsteps echoed behind her. Lamont yelled, and panic flooded her veins. Turned to run, her breath catching. The shadows were no longer loyal companions. They felt more like monsters clawing at her back. The gust of wind picked up again, throwing droplets of rain on her face, blurring her vision as she sprinted through the alley. She screamed out, desperate for any answer. he shouted, his voice piercing through the darkness. She spotted him near the gate, heart soaring even as danger loomed. She called back, determination fueling every stride. As she reached him, she skidded to a stop. She urged, her eyes firing with urgency. Michael's eyes were wild, searching her face for answers. To the park. They bolted toward the gate, but just as they stepped through, they heard Lamont's furious shouts echo in the distance. Adrenaline shot through Sarah as they dashed into the park, branches brushing against them, becoming their cover. The air was thick with the scent of fresh rain, a bewildering comfort amidst the chaos. Michael pointed to a cluster of trees, thick and protective. They maneuvered their way through, suddenly enveloped in a world that felt both safe and treacherous. Sarah whispered, her breath hitching. They crouched behind a thick trunk, the sounds of their pursuer fading into the depth of the park. "I can't believe this is happening," Michael panted, leaning against the tree, trying to calm his racing heart. She exclaimed softly, peering around the trunk, "But we need to stay quiet." Her voice trailed off, the reality of what they were up against crashing back in. Just then her phone buzzed again, snapping their attention. Michael cursed, his voice barely above a whisper. "They must have seen us leave the cafe," Sarah replied, fear coursing through her body, but she felt a surge of anger. Michael asked, eyes darting around nervously, "Think about it, he's expecting us to run. Maybe we should do the opposite." Michael locked eyes with her, the resolve in her voice sparking a flicker of hope. They waited, crouched behind the tree, hearts pounding. The rain began to ease, drizzles falling gently as the world around them grew even eerier in the dim light of street lamps filtering through the leaves. Every rustle of wind seemed magnified. Time stretched, seconds morphing into what felt like hours. They clung to each other, an unspoken bond anchoring them together in that moment of uncertainty. Michael whispered, the fear dripping from his voice. "We can't let that stop us," Sarah replied carefully. Just then there was a sound, heavy footsteps crunching against the wet leaves. Sarah's heart leaped into her throat. They exchanged quick glances, adrenaline turning their fear into fuel. Peering around the trunk once more, she saw the shadow moving closer. Lamont was prowling through the park, his anger palpable. He called out, voice dripping with that chilling confidence he always carried. Sarah whispered fiercely, gripping Michael's hand. They bolted from their shelter, racing in the opposite direction, adrenaline propelling them forward. The rush of the trees streaked by, the world blurring in the chaos. Sarah commanded, the sounds of branches snapping behind them making everything feel more urgent. They veered off the main path, slipping down a narrow route lined with bushes. As they dashed deeper into the park, their thoughts raced as fast as their pounding hearts. "We need to find a place to hide," Michael gasped, glancing back. Sarah pointed to a small shed tucked away behind the trees, nearly hidden from sight. They bolted toward the shed, finally pushing through the door, slamming it shut behind them. The world outside faded, the noise dulling to a low hum as they stood together, hearts racing, breaths heavy in the silence. Michael whispered, scanning the dark interior. Sarah pressed her back against the wall, trying to steady her mind. They listened intently, every creak of the floorboards echoing ominously. Time ticked away, and for a moment they both dared to hope they had escaped. "I never thought I'd end up here," Michael murmured, shaking his head in disbelief. "Neither did I," Sarah replied, a hint of disbelief coloring her tone. Michael's voice wavered. Sarah took a deep breath, summoning her strength. "We're going to outsmart him." They exchanged ideas, strategizing in hushed voices, a bond forming deeper than they had ever felt before. The pressure of the outside world felt fuzzy now, almost surreal. After several minutes that felt like lifetimes, the noises outside began to change. "I think he's moving away," Michael said, his eyes widening. Sarah's heart raced anew. "Now's our chance." They slipped carefully out of the shed, scanning the surroundings for any signs of danger. Slowly they made their way back through the park, poised and ready. "Stick close," Sarah whispered, her instincts guiding her. As they stepped onto the main path, they spotted the flickering lights of the street ahead. Safety was so close, yet the fear loomed with each step they took. Just then a loud crashing noise broke the silence, and instinctively they ducked behind a nearby tree. Lamont was on the next path over, stumbling through the bushes, his anger palpable. Michael squeezed Sarah's hand tightly, heart racing. "Keep moving," she said softly but firmly. Together they dashed toward the streetlights, feeling the cobblestones crunch beneath their feet. Thrill of danger surged through them as they reached the edge of the park. Once they were on the street, they quickly searched for a way out, but just as they were about to cross, Sarah spotted Lamont approaching and froze. She urged Michael, urgency gripping her voice. They dashed across the street, but the moment they reached the other side, a car screeched to a halt, lights blaring in their direction. "Hey," a stranger yelled from the driver's seat, their face shadowed in uncertainty. Without hesitation, Sarah pushed Michael ahead. "Get in," they both dove into the car just as Lamont's voice roared behind them. The driver slammed on the gas and they sped away, leaving the chaos behind. Breathing heavily, they looked at each other, disbelief flooding their expressions. "I can't believe we made it," Michael finally said, panting but safe, his voice a shaky whisper. "We did," Sarah replied, her spirit lifting as relief washed over her. As the car sped through the streets, their shared experience fused them together. In that moment, they not only escaped their pursuer, but also stepped into a new chapter of their lives united by fear, courage, and the strength they had discovered within themselves. And as the lights of the city blurred outside the window, Sarah realized they were not only running from danger, but also toward a future they could shape together, a bond forged in fire, ready to take on whatever lay ahead. She was just about to take a sip of her coffee when the door swung open with a bang, rattling in its frame. The bell above jingled frantically, casting a ripple of disruption through the cozy cafe. Lily's heart skipped as she looked up, her eyes locking onto a figure standing in the doorway. It was Noah, drenched from the rain, breath hitching in his throat as he scanned the room. His presence was magnetic yet tense, and Lily felt a rush of adrenaline surge through her. She had known this meeting would carry weight, but she didn't expect it to feel like a scene from a thriller. They had met in this cafe countless times, but today, an undercurrent of danger hung in the air. She called, waving him over, her voice barely rising above the hum around her. He moved quickly to her corner table, glancing over his shoulder as if he expected someone to follow. His voice was urgent, a whisper filled with desperation. Lily nodded, heart pounding, and fished an envelope from her bag. Yes, but we have to hurry. For the briefest moment, his eyes widened with concern. Before she could answer, the cafe door swung open again, letting in a gust of wind that carried the rain with it. In strode Marcus, a well-dressed man with an air of authority that demanded attention. The room seemed to shrink as he entered, like a predator stepping into its territory. Lily froze. She had hoped to avoid a confrontation. "Noah," she whispered, her voice barely audible. Noah turned slowly, his expression darkening as realization washed over him. "We need to go," but it was too late. Marcus scanned the cafe, his piercing gaze locking onto them. "Fancy seeing you here, Noah," he said, a sinister smile creeping across his lips. "We're leaving," Noah said, taking a step back. Marcus pushed, practically stepping into their space. In that moment, instinct took over. Lily pointed toward the back exit. "Noah, go." The urgency in her voice broke through the tension. Without waiting for another second, Noah turned and dashed toward the back. Marcus shouted, but Lily didn't look back. She faced him, willing herself to stand firm, adrenaline flooding her veins. "You won't stop him," she said, bravado replacing the fear coursing through her. Marcus tilted his head, eyes narrowly. "You think you can protect him, but I know who you are, and I won't let you harm him," she replied, her voice steadier than she felt. Just as Marcus stepped closer, her phone buzzed in her pocket. The sudden vibration rattled her, but she quickly pulled it out. It was Noah calling her from the back exit. Panic surged again, but she answered. "Lily," his voice crackled through the line, breathless and frantic. "Head straight down the alley," he asked, the trembling in his voice evident. "Trust me," she urged, feeling the weight of uncertainty press down on her. But she knew they needed a plan, and she had to remain calm. Marcus stepped closer, his expression darkening. "Nothing you need to worry about," she shot back, trying to keep her gaze steady. She could feel her heart hammering in her chest. "Let me make this clear, he can't get away. Then you'll have to go through me," she challenged, adrenaline pulsing. "Bold words for someone who doesn't have anything to back them up," Marcus replied, stepping into her personal space, smugness painting his features. He shifted slightly, the atmosphere thick with tension. Noah's voice came through again, startling her. She shouted, knowing he must be close. Before Marcus could respond, Lily spun around, her instincts screaming for her to act. She rushed toward the door leading to the back alley, hoping to cut off any chance of Marcus following Noah. Marcus bellowed, but she didn't reply. As she burst through the door, the cacophony of rain enveloped her. The alley was dimly lit, shadows dancing on the walls. She called out, her voice slicing through the pounding rain. He shouted back, emerging from the darkness. He breathed heavily, eyes wide with urgency. Lily asked, glancing over her shoulder, fear gnawing at her edges. He said, panic lacing his voice, "Then we need to move." Together, they rushed deeper into the alley, illuminated by sporadic street lamps. Noah asked, glancing back nervously. "To the park, we can get lost in the trees," she suggested, pushing herself to stay focused. Her mind raced with the possibilities of what could happen. They sprinted toward the park, the cool air rushing past them. Just then, Lily's phone vibrated again. Text from Marcus. She urged, trying to ignore the chill that washed over her. They reached the edge of the park, and Lily felt a mix of relief and dread. She pointed to a cluster of trees, thick and dark. They could use the cover. As they ducked behind the nearest trunk, the rain began to taper off, leaving behind a haunting silence. Noah whispered, eyes wide with fear. "We won't let that happen," Lily assured him, her tone fierce. Noah pointed at a small maintenance shed peeking through the bushes. They dashed toward the shed, slipping inside just as they heard footsteps crunching through the leaves. Holding their breath, they listened, heartbeats echoing in the confined space. Marcus's voice echoed in the distance. Lily felt a shiver run down her spine. They couldn't let him find them. She turned to Noah, who was visibly shaking. He muttered, panic evident in his tone, "Because I won't let him take you." She grasped his hand tightly, willing them both to remain steady. Moments felt like hours as they waited, shushing each other when their breaths grew too loud. The tension hung thick in the air. Another crash of branches broke through the stillness. Marcus taunted, anger slicing through his voice. As they listened, Lily felt a sudden surge of defiance. "He's waiting for us to make a move. We need to surprise him," she whispered. Noah's eyes widened. "You're crazy. It's our only chance. Trust me," she pleaded, determination flooding her voice. Just then the footsteps grew louder and Lily knew they had no time to waste. On three, 1, 2, they burst from the shed, hearts racing as they dashed across the open space. The park transformed into a blur as they weaved through the trees, desperate to put distance between them and Marcus. Noah shouted, pointing to a large tree with low-hanging branches. They could climb, find refuge high above the ground. They scrambled up, limbs shaking with effort and fear as they reached the first sturdy branch. From there they could watch as Marcus stormed through the park, fury etched across his face. He yelled, voice heavy with frustration. Lily held her breath as Marcus passed beneath them, scanning the area with ruthless determination. They had made it up just in time. Noah whispered, eyes darting nervously. "Stay quiet, let him move on, then we'll find a way out," she suggested, her mind racing to come up with a plan. Just as they thought they were safe, the unmistakable sound of footsteps approached again. Marcus called, his voice chilling as he halted below their tree. Her heart raced, anxiety flooding her senses. What if he found them? Suddenly a thought struck. "I have a plan," she whispered to Noah. Noah nodded, determination flaring in his eyes. They watched as Marcus paced beneath them, his shadow flickering dangerously close. "You know, this isn't a game," he spat. "You think I won't find you?" Lily felt her heart sink at the thought of what he was capable of, but her resolve remained unyielding. At just the right moment, Marcus finally turned away to inspect another path. Lily urged, and they quickly climbed down, hitting the ground with soft thuds. They raced toward the exit, adrenaline fueling their flight, but they could hear his footsteps trailing behind, a relentless predator refusing to give in. As they dashed across the open space toward the fountain, Lily's mind was a whirlwind of strategies. She yelled over her shoulder. Noah shouted back, panting heavily, "Left." "The plaza is just ahead." They pushed harder, the fountain growing closer, glimmering under the moonlight like a beacon of hope. They burst into the plaza, seeking cover among the passerby who were oblivious to the danger trailing them. Heart pounding, they now needed to keep their wits about them while fitting into the crowd. Lily felt a faint sense of calm wash over her as they weaved through the people, but the darkness still loomed in the periphery. "Stick close, don't let them spot us," she whispered fiercely. "I won't let that happen," he assured her, determination cementing in his voice. They moved deeper into the crowd, blending seamlessly, yet Lily could feel the tension rising as she sensed Marcus's presence still lurking nearby. Suddenly she turned to Noah, her eyes wide. There, the bakery. Without hesitation, they bolted toward the warm light spilling out from the bakery door. Pushing it open, they slipped inside, panting heavily. The cozy smell of pastries filled the air, a strange comfort amidst their frantic escape, but they couldn't linger. Lily glanced at the door, ready to bolt again if necessary. "Stay near the back," she whispered, hoping the warm light could shelter them even for a moment longer. They stuck to the shadows, stealing glances through the glass window at the street beyond. The world outside continued on as if nothing was amiss, and yet their hearts raced with fear. Then came the sound of heavy footsteps again. It was Marcus appearing in front of the bakery, scanning the area with cold determination. Lily's breath caught in her throat, her heart plunging as she prepared for the worst. He called, voice dripping with malice. Noah clenched her hand tightly, fear radiating from him. He asked, barely a whisper. "Just hang tight," she replied, her heart racing as she pushed back panic, refusing to let it consume her. They remained in silence, breaths barely audible as they watched Marcus move closer, assessing the bakery entrance. And then, like a stroke of luck, a group of people walked by, blocking Marcus's view. They took their moment, sliding quietly to another exit at the back of the bakery. "We need to move," Lily whispered. They crept through the kitchen, slipping out the back door. The cool night air hit them like a breath of fresh hope. "Over there," Noah pointed ahead to the street. "Exactly, we'll get a cab or find help," she agreed, adrenaline urging them onward. They crept along the edges of the street, keeping to the shadows, the adrenaline weaving them tighter, closer. Noah asked, glancing back one last time. "We will be," she promised, determination shining through her voice. But once again, that sense of dread loomed thick in the air as they made their way toward the main road. The shadows were closing in, but they refused to let fear consume them. Finally, they reached the street corner and Lily turned to Noah. No sooner had she said those words than there was a sudden commotion behind them. A voice roared and they turned to see Marcus on their tail again, fury written across his face. Lily shouted, shoving Noah forward. They bolted across the road, dodging cars and weaving in and out, the noise of the city a stark contrast to the chaos enveloping them. Noah pointed to a parked cab on the corner. With adrenaline surging, they forced the door open, tumbling inside just as Marcus reached the curb. "Drive," Lily yelled, heart racing as she turned to the driver. Without hesitating, the driver stepped on the gas, screeching away from the chaos. Lily turned back, watching as Marcus became just a shadow in the rearview mirror, anger rippling through his figure as they pulled away. Breathless, she leaned back against the seat, shock coursing through her veins. Noah let out a startled laugh, mixing disbelief and relief. But we didn't give up, Lily replied, their eyes locking, the moment bursting with unspoken promises, a deepening bond forged in the heat of chaos. As the city lights glimmered outside the window, casting shadows of hope and safety, they realized their journey together was only beginning, not just a fight for survival, but an adventure they would take on hand in hand. They were resilient, united by the darkness they had run from and the light they had barely grasped. In that moment, they didn't just escape, they transformed. Their story became one of courage, and from that day forward, nothing would ever be the same. The cafe was buzzing with the low hum of conversation, the rich aroma of coffee filling the air, but Amelia felt like she was suffocating. She sat at a table near the window, her eyes darting between the entrance and her phone. Any second now, she could feel the tension in her chest tightening like a vice. A quick glance at the clock told her that time was slipping away. He was late. That wasn't like Jake. He always arrived early, always. Just then the door swung open and a gust of cold air rushed in, carrying the faint scent of rain. In stepped Jake, his face flushed from the chill, his eyes scanning the room. Amelia's heart raced as she quickly waved him over. There was a spark of relief in his eyes when he spotted her. Jake hurried to her side, his expression shifting from worry to determination. He whispered urgently. Amelia nodded, pulling an envelope from her bag. Yes, but we need to move. Jake leaned in closer and a look of urgency ignited on his face. As she spoke, the door opened again and walked a tall figure shrouded in shadows, Marcus. The moment she saw him, the air turned heavy, suffocating. Jake, she hissed, urgency thrumming in her veins. Jake turned, his eyes widening. We have to get out. Before he could finish the thought, Marcus's voice boomed across the cafe, slicing through the tension like a knife. Amelia's heart felt like it was in her throat. She urged Jake, pointing to the back exit, her instincts screaming for her to act. Jake barely hesitated. He turned and bolted toward the back, fear propelling his every step. He called back, "I'll hold him off." Jake glanced back, uncertainty flashing in his eyes, but time was running out. Amelia turned her full attention to Marcus just as he stalked toward her. He said, his smile revealing teeth like a predator, hungry and cold. "Nowhere you can follow," she declared, forcing her voice to sound confident. "Bold words for someone caught in a corner," Marcus retorted, stepping closer, making sure she felt the weight of his threat. But just as fear began to creep into her thoughts, her phone buzzed in her pocket. With a quick swipe, she pulled it out, seeing Jake's name flash on the screen. His voice crackled through the line, urgency radiating from every word. "I'm at the exit. Go straight down the alley. Trust me." Panic clawed at her throat as she kept her gaze fixed on Marcus, not daring to lose her focus. "Don't take too long," Jake warned, his voice filled with anxiety. "Just move." As she hung up, Marcus leaned in closer, his icy gaze boring into her. "You think you can protect him?" "I know more than you think," Amelia replied, her heart pounding louder than her fears. Marcus sneered, his breath reeking of entitlement. In that instant, she thought of Jake, how desperate he must feel right now. "Just let him go, Marcus." Marcus laughed, a low rumble that sent chills down her spine. As he took a menacing step closer, Amelia's instincts kicked in. She pointed toward the back exit with a fierce determination. "Go." Jake could feel the fear pushing him forward. He sprinted down the dimly lit alley, the cold air biting at his skin, but adrenaline kept him moving. He called out, panic lacing through his breath. She shouted back, her heart aching for him but resolute in her stance against Marcus. But Marcus had no intention of letting them escape. He lunged forward, arm outstretched to grab her. "I'm not afraid of you." Amelia held her ground, adrenaline surging through her. With a sudden movement, she twisted, evading his grip. For a brief moment, surprise flickered across Marcus's face, and that was enough. Amelia darted toward the back door, pushing through the heavy wood just in time to hear an ominous crash behind her. She shouted, her heart tightening as she dashed into the alley. His voice echoed back, and relief washed over her. He emerged from the shadows, still catching his breath. "Not yet, but we have to keep moving. There's a maintenance shed up ahead." They rushed through the alley, their footsteps echoing against the brick walls. Each moment lingered as uncertainty hung overhead. Jake's voice wavered with fear. "He won't," she said firmly, the conviction ringing true. As they neared the maintenance shed, they spotted it partially hidden behind a cluster of trees. They hurried inside just as Amelia felt the ground shake with the force of someone approaching. Loud footsteps filled the alley and they held their breath, pressing against the wall, the shadows of the shed wrapping around them. "I know you're in there," Marcus shouted, his voice dripping with menace. Jake whispered, eyes wide with dread. Amelia clenched her fists, her heart pounding like a drum in her ears. "We wait for him to pass, then make a move for the park." Just then they heard a crack as Marcus kicked the door. Amelia's heart raced. "We're not going to let him get the best of us," she told Jake fiercely. "Absolutely." As Marcus slammed against the door again, Amelia felt the adrenaline surge through her body. She said, hand on the door, ready to make their escape. Jake nodded, and they pushed through the door with all their might, bursting out into the cool night air. They bolted toward the park, adrenaline fueling their frantic dash through the trees. Jake shouted, his breath heavy with fear. Amelia cried, dodging branches as they plunged deeper into the night. They ran through the thick trees, branches tugging at their clothes, but they couldn't slow down. She could hear Marcus behind them, his shouts piercing through the night like a frightening siren. Amelia urged, pushing herself to run faster. Heart pounding, she led the way, weaving through the shadows. They couldn't let Marcus catch them. As they reached a clearing, Jake stumbled, and Amelia turned to catch him. Get him. He nodded, determination resolute in his eyes. They pressed forward, barely staying ahead of danger. He gasped, eyes darting nervously around the park. The fountain, it's just up ahead. Rushing toward the fountain, they finally spotted it glistening under the moonlight, but Marcus was closing in. Amelia shouted, fear spurring them forward. They skidded to a stop at the fountain, water cascading in tranquil streams, a stark contrast to the storm brewing behind them. We can't stop, Jake warned, chest heaving with exertion. He could, but before he could finish, Marcus stepped from the shadows, his presence imposing and predatory. Caught you, he sneered, eyes glinting with triumph. Amelia shouted, positioning herself between Marcus and Jake, her heart racing. Marcus mocked, taking a threatening step forward. Fear surged, but she didn't back down. In that moment, their eyes locked, the tension palpable in the air. Amelia knew they couldn't let fear take hold again. With renewed determination, she turned to Jake. Run, get to the street, he protested, grasping her hand. She insisted, eyes blazing with resolve. Just go, we'll meet at the diner. With a nod, Jake sprinted toward the street, and in that split second, Marcus lunged at her. She lost her footing, but so did he. They both tumbled to the ground, arms flailing. She yelled, hoping her shout would reach him in time. As Marcus scrambled to regain control, Amelia kicked out, hitting him in the shin. She screamed, scrambling to her feet. Marcus yelled, his fury rolling off him in waves, but she wouldn't let him intimidate her. Adrenaline turned her fear into fire. She shoved past him, racing toward the street where Jake had disappeared. He shouted far off in the distance. She yelled back, urgency propelling her forward. Racing through the darkness, she stumbled out onto the street, her heart racing as she finally spotted Jake by a payphone, frantically pressing buttons. He urged as Amelia approached. She bolted toward him, the sound of footsteps behind her urging her on. They flung themselves against the car as the driver's eyes widened. What are you, just drive, Jake shouted, practically shoving her inside. The driver didn't hesitate, peeling away from the curb just as Marcus stormed into view, too late to catch them. As they sped off, Amelia felt the weight in her chest slowly lift, disbelief mixing with relief. Jake finally let out a breath, glancing back at the fading danger. We made it, he said, disbelief in his voice. Yeah, Amelia replied, though her heart still raced at the thought of what had just happened. Let's go to the diner, he suggested, looking shaky yet resolute. Right, she nodded, the reality of their escape setting in. They had run from danger together, faced fear head-on, but now the truth hung heavily in the air. As they made their way to safety, they realized they had forged an unbreakable bond that night, an understanding deeper than mere friendship, a connection that thrived amidst the chaos. They had fought darkness and emerged stronger, ready to face whatever came next. And as the city lights blurred past, their futures sparkled with a fierce resolve. No matter what threats loomed, they would confront them together, hand in hand. The cafe was alive with the sounds of laughter and the smell of freshly brewed coffee, but for Emily it felt like the world had come to a standstill. She tapped her foot nervously under the table, glancing at her phone again. The screen read 7:15 p.m. 15 minutes late. Where was he? Her heart raced, her mind replaying the conversation they'd had just hours ago. The urgency in his voice had gripped her, and now the weight of anticipation pressed down on her chest. The plan had been simple: meet at the cafe, exchange the information, and go separate ways, but nothing ever went as planned. Suddenly, the door swung open, and the wind gusted through the room, carrying a chill that made her shiver. In walked Liam, drenched and disheveled, his hair plastered to his forehead. He scanned the crowded room, and relief flooded her when their eyes met. He called out, hurrying to her table. Before she could respond, she noticed the tension in his shoulders, the way his eyes darted around the cafe like he was searching for something or someone. She asked, her voice low. We need to move, he said urgently, plopping down in the chair across from her. She nodded, feeling the envelope in her bag weigh heavier than before. Yes, but we have to be quick. His eyes widened, and just then the door opened again. In walked Marcus, a figure known for his intimidating presence and vindictive nature. The energy in the room shifted, and Emily felt a knot tighten in her stomach. Liam, she whispered, panic rising in her voice. Stay calm, he said, but his eyes told a different story. Marcus scanned the room, his gaze lingering on the two of them. Well, look who we have here, he said, stepping closer, the arrogance oozing from his every word. I'm not interested in whatever you're selling, Marcus, Liam shot back, a mixture of defiance and fear in his voice. Both of them knew that Marcus didn't take no for an answer. Emily felt the heat rise in her chest, but then she remembered the plan. She pointed toward the back exit, urgency coursing through her. Liam seemed frozen for a second. She insisted, fear propelling her words. Without another moment of hesitation, he nodded and sprinted toward the back, but as he did, Marcus lunged forward. He bellowed, his voice echoing through the cafe. Emily shouted, clutching her phone tightly as she watched Liam dart through the door. Marcus snarled, turning toward her with a malicious grin. Leave us alone, Emily shot back, adrenaline surging through her veins, but Marcus wasn't finished. You think you can protect him? Emily screamed into her phone, hoping for a response. Just as she pressed the call button, the sound of a ringing phone filled the room, a clash with the chaos that surrounded them. It was an incoming text from Liam. "I'm at the alley. Go straight down and wait for my signal," she whispered, raising her head to glance at Marcus, whose attention was now fully on her. He mocked, inching closer. "Think you can escape with him?" She shot back, fear and anger boiling inside her. Marcus laughed, the sound grating against her nerves. Really? Before she could respond, her phone rang again, this time vibrating in her pocket. She glanced down, her stomach dropping as she saw it was Liam. "I'm in the alley. Head to the dumpsters." Marcus took another step toward her, and Emily felt her heart race. She almost shouted, trying to gather her courage, but Marcus was unfazed. "I can't let you get away with this." As she watched him approach, she felt a rush of determination. Suddenly, with the sounds of the cafe buzzing behind them, Emily darted toward the back exit. With her heart pounding in her chest, she pushed through the door and into the alley, the cold air slapping her face. She called out, adrenaline fueling her every move. His voice came from around the corner, and she sprinted towards it, spotting him just as he rounded the dumpster. Liam gasped, his eyes wide with anxiety. "For now, you need to keep moving," Emily urged, her eyes darting to the entrance of the alley. He asked, breathless, "There's a path that leads to the park." Without waiting for a response, she grabbed his hand and they took off down the alley. Rain lightly drizzled around them, the sound of pounding water echoing like a heartbeat in her ears. Emily urged, glancing back as they ran. Liam asked, glancing nervously over his shoulder. "I don't know." Tension thrummed between them as they reached the end of the alley and burst into the park, shadows falling around them like cloaks of safety. As they entered the darkness, tree branches reached out like skeletal fingers, and the cold air bit at her cheeks. She said, pulling Liam toward a thicket of trees. They ducked behind them, hearts pounding, bodies pressed together as they sank into the shadows. "We need to keep low," she whispered, the thrill of fear coursing through her veins. He asked, breathing heavily, "Let's listen." Minutes stretched into what felt like hours, the rustle of leaves and distant sounds of the city fading into a haunting silence. Emily focused on her breathing, trying to stay calm. As they waited, she could feel Liam's anxiety radiating beside her, mirroring her own. "We can't stay hidden here," he said finally, his voice a murmur. "I know," she replied, trying to keep her voice steady. Just then, a rustle of branches nearby jolted them both. Emily held her breath, tension coiling tight like a spring as footsteps echoed through the darkness. "You're not going to get away," Marcus called out, his voice reverberating through the stillness. "Damn it," Liam murmured, dread seeping into his voice. "Our only shot is to outsmart him," Emily whispered, her mind racing for a plan. "We need to create a distraction." "Right?" Liam asked, his voice trembling. Before she could respond, another noise interrupted, the sound of something heavy crashing in the distance. They exchanged glances, the look in Liam's eyes reflecting a flicker of hope. "Maybe we can use that," Emily suggested, seizing the opportunity. "Follow my lead," she instructed, her heart racing. They both peered around the edge of the thicket, eyes scanning for any sign of Marcus. She whispered, and Liam nodded, determination in his eyes. They moved quietly through the shadows, edging toward the sound of the crash. As they crept forward, they noticed a pile of abandoned crates leaning precariously against a fence. Emily's heart raced as she formulated a plan. She asked, pointing at the pile, "Are you crazy? If he hears us, we won't be able to move if we don't do this." With that urgency in her voice, Liam reluctantly nodded. Together, they silently approached the stack and leaned against it, sweat beading on their foreheads. "On three," Emily said, bracing herself. With all their strength, they shoved the crates, watching as they tumbled over and crashed to the ground, the sound echoing through the park like thunder. Emily hissed, pulling Liam with her as they darted in the opposite direction, praying that Marcus would be distracted. The sound had worked. They could see Marcus racing toward the noise, and Emily felt a surge of adrenaline pushing them forward. She whispered urgently to Liam, feeling fear and determination wrap around her tightly. They ran for what felt like hours, zigzagging through the underbrush, fear driving them. The moonlight peeked through the trees, guiding their steps as they desperately sought an escape. But just as they reached the edge of the park, they heard heavy footsteps behind them again. Marcus was still on their trail. Liam gasped, glancing back with wide eyes. Emily's mind raced. "Where's the nearest building?" Liam pointed to a small diner that glimmered invitingly in the distance. They sprinted toward the diner, pushing through the door just in time. Emily shouted as she ducked behind a booth, pulling Liam with her. The interior was warm and inviting, a stark contrast to the chaos outside, but she felt the heaviness of fear still pressing against her. "Stay low," she instructed, trying to regain control of the situation. They held their breaths as footsteps echoed from outside. She could feel Liam's hands trembling beside hers, but she squeezed them gently, grounding him in the moment. "Just wait," she whispered, focusing on the door, willing Marcus not to follow them in. Just then the door swung open and Marcus stepped inside, looking around with that predatory grin. "I know you're in here," he called out, his voice filled with malice. Emily shivered, gripping Liam's hand tighter. "We We can't let him find us, she whispered. Marcus walked deeper into the diner, scanning every corner, a sense of satisfaction evident in his movements. You think you can run away? We have to find a way out, Liam murmured, looking around. Emily had an idea. Let's go then, Liam said. They moved slowly, trying to remain silent as Marcus continued his search. Emily led the way toward the back, navigating through the maze of tables and chairs. He was getting closer, but together they slipped through the door leading to the back alley, the fresh air feeling like a lifeline. Liam asked, eyes darting nervously. I don't know, she admitted, looking around at the dimly lit alley. Suddenly, Emily's phone buzzed with a message, breaking through the tension. It was from a number she didn't recognize. You can't hide from him, Liam asked, peering over her shoulder. She responded, fear creeping back in. But we have to get out of here. If Marcus finds us before she could finish, the door to the diner swung open again and Marcus stepped out, looking furious. He shouted, eyes blazing. Without thinking, they bolted down the alley, racing toward the street. Liam yelled, panting heavily. Just keep running. They darted onto the street, vehicles speeding by on one side, the neon lights of the city flickering around them like stars in the night. They could hear Marcus screaming behind them, and Emily felt a surge of adrenaline. They finally reached a crowded intersection filled with people, and just as they slowed down, Emily's heart pounded in her chest. They could blend in here at least for a moment. Liam asked, his anxious eyes scanning the area. She suggested, urgency bubbling inside her again. Just then, a taxi pulled up, and Emily waved her arms wildly. The driver rolled down the window, eyes widened. Just drive, she exclaimed, pushing Liam inside before sliding in herself. The driver questioned, glancing nervously at the back seat. Liam shouted, determination filling his voice. With a nod, the driver took off, the city lights blurring past like stars in a dream. As they sped away from the chaos, Emily finally felt the weight on her shoulders begin to lift. We did it, she gasped, disbelief mingling with relief. For now, Liam replied, a shred of fear still alive in his voice. Emily turned to him, determination glinting in her eyes. We'll figure this out. And in that moment, surrounded by the hum of the city and the safety of the taxi, they exchanged a knowing glance. Whatever lay ahead, they would face it together. They had run from darkness into the light, a bond forged through fear and courage. Together, they were unstoppable. The cafe was dimly lit, filled with the aroma of freshly brewed coffee and pastries, but for Mia, it felt as stifling as a closed box. She sat at a small table against the wall, tapping her foot nervously against the floor. Every minute felt like an hour. She glanced at her phone again, still no text, no call. Where was he? Outside, rain drummed against the window, creating a rhythm that mirrored her anxiety. She should have been focused on the gentle chatter around her or the warmth of her coffee cup, but her thoughts were consumed with worry. They had planned this meeting for weeks, and now all of that felt precarious. Suddenly, the door swung open, a gust of cold air spilling in. Mia looked up, hopeful. A figure emerged, drenched from the rain, icy droplets rolling off his brow. It was Ethan, his dark hair matted against his forehead, eyes wide with urgency. He gasped, rushing to her side. I'm sorry I'm late, she whispered, glancing around the cafe. Ethan shook his head but frowned, scanning the other patrons. I don't know, her stomach dropped. We have to get the file and leave. Quickly, she pulled an envelope from her bag, their only hope. I got it, she said, pushing it across the table. Just then, the bell above the door jingled again, and Mia's blood ran cold. A tall figure stepped in, soaked and menacing, the kind of person who turned heads for all the wrong reasons. It was Daniel, the man they had tried to evade for months. Ethan, he barked, his voice dripping with disdain as he made a beeline for their table. Didn't expect to find you here. Mia felt a chill run down her spine, dread knotting in her stomach. Leave us alone, Daniel, Ethan said firmly, but his voice trembled slightly. Daniel smirked, the corners of his lips curling like thorns. Why, I'm just here to chat. He leaned in closer, making Mia shrink back in her seat. Panic surged through Mia. Ethan, we need to go. She pointed toward the back exit, and desperation filled her voice. Ethan looked conflicted, glancing between Daniel and the exit. Yes, she insisted. Without further hesitation, Ethan clutched the envelope and bolted for the back door, moving faster than she'd ever seen him. Daniel shouted, the threat in his voice sharpening. Mia yelled, adrenaline surging as she turned to confront Daniel, standing her ground. Just as the tension peaked, her phone buzzed in her pocket. She almost ignored it, but the instinct to check outweighed her fear. It was Ethan calling her from the alley. His voice crackled, laced with panic. I'm coming, she whispered back, trying to keep her voice steady. Mia could hear shuffling from Daniel's direction and felt time slipping away. Daniel roared, followed by crashing footsteps as he swiftly turned to pursue. She shouted, clenching her fists, feeling the pressure build in her chest. He asked, more desperate now. She urged, turning her full attention back to Daniel, who was now stalking closer. She had to buy Ethan time. Daniel sneered, his gaze heavy with menace. Mia shouted, her courage surging as she faced him, but Daniel was unfazed, moving closer, intimidating her with every step. You underestimate me. Mia needed to act. In that split second, Daniel lunged. The world around her slowed to a crawl. Mia ducked to the side just in time, her heart pounding as she made a dash for the exit. As she burst through the door, she barely heard Daniel's furious shout. She sprinted into the alley, cool rain splashing against her skin, and quickly spotted Ethan near the dumpster, his eyes wide. He gasped, and the relief washed over both of them in an infectious wave. She urged, her voice urgent. They rushed down the bleak alley, dodging puddles, the din of the cafe fading into the background. I can't believe we made it this far, Ethan breathed, glancing back nervously. Don't stop, just keep going. In the chaos, they dashed toward a narrow path at the end of the alley that led to a small park, trees thick with foliage promising a haven of concealment. As they entered the park, the sound of rain mixed with the rustling leaves enveloped them, creating an eerie sense of safety. This has to work, Mia whispered. Ethan asked, glancing over his shoulder nervously. Let's head to that cluster of trees, she said, pointing to a dense thicket where they could hide. They ducked behind the trees, heartbeats thudding in the silence that enveloped them. Rain pattered on the leaves overhead, but it was easy to forget the storm as they tried to catch their breath, adrenaline still thrumming through their veins. Ethan asked, his voice tight with anxiety. I don't know, she admitted, pulling her phone from her pocket to check. Still no messages, but we can't stay here forever. Just then, the sound of crunching leaves made them both freeze. A shadow emerged from the darkness, a hooded figure creeping closer. Their hearts raced as the figure landed against a nearby tree, almost directly in line with where they were hiding. It was Daniel, his voice low and dangerous, echoing through the stillness. Mia felt her pulse quicken, dread pooling in her stomach. We can't let him find us, she whispered urgently to Ethan. Ethan whispered back, his eyes wide with fear. Just then, Ethan's phone buzzed in his pocket, causing them both to jump. He took it out cautiously, eyes widening as he read the message. It's from my brother, he said urgently. Mia breathed, the tension suffocating. Another crack of branches reminded them of their imminent threat. Daniel's not going to let us go. We need to distract him, Mia urged, her heart racing. Are you crazy? Ethan exclaimed, panic flooding his voice. We have to take that risk or we'll end up worse off, she replied, determination flooding her veins. At that moment, Daniel shouted again, his voice slicing through the air like a dagger. I know you're out there. I'm going to create a diversion, Mia said, steeling herself. You wait here, and when I say go, you run to the main road. Ethan's voice cracked, filled with worry. She said, feeling adrenaline surge within her. With that, she darted away from their hiding place, moving silently toward the edge of the park. She could hear Daniel moving closer, a beast prowling for its prey. She shouted, making her voice echo in the silence. Daniel turned sharply, eyes sharp with surprise. She shouted, heart racing. As she caught his attention completely, she turned and sprinted, adrenaline coursing through her veins. He thundered after her, the ground shaking with his footsteps as he lunged forward. Mia ran faster than she ever had, her mind racing. She could hear him gaining on her, each step pounding behind her like a war drum. She zigzagged through the trees, trying to lose him in the shadows. Glancing back, she spotted him not far behind, a furious expression etched on his face. Just then, she caught a glimpse of the main road up ahead. She felt hope surge in her chest. If she could reach it, they might find safety. Ethan shouted from the thicket, drawing her attention back. With her heart in her throat, she darted toward the road, determined to make it. But just as she neared the edge of the trees, a heavy hand grabbed her arm, yanking her back. Daniel growled, pulling her close, his face contorted in rage. Mia, Ethan shouted, panic flooding his voice as he ran toward them. Daniel barked, his grip tightening around her arm. Desperation clawed at Mia as she struggled against his grip. She screamed, wriggling to break free. Ethan yelled, his voice rising, but Daniel only laughed menacingly. Do you really think you can save her? She's mine now, Daniel taunted, a smirk playing on his lips. Mia's heart raced, the world around her blurring as she fought against panic. Without thinking, she dug deep into her pocket and pulled out her phone. She shouted, raising it high. Call for. But before Ethan could react, Daniel yanked the phone out of her hand and tossed it aside. Mia cried, watching as it clattered to the ground, shattered. Daniel grinned, the satisfaction of his cruelty evident in his eyes. But just as fear threatened to consume her, she remembered the training from her self-defense classes, the maneuvers she had practiced over and over. Suddenly, a plan ignited in her mind. In one swift motion, she pivoted and slammed her foot against Daniel's shin, catching him off guard. He let go, howling in pain. She yelled to Ethan, shoving him away, but he hesitated, eyes wide. She shouted fiercely. In that instant, Daniel lunged again, but she was ready. She sidestepped him and he stumbled past her, the momentum carrying him forward. She urged Ethan, who finally turned and bolted toward the road. He called back, desperation coating his voice. She yelled again, knowing she had only seconds before Daniel regained his balance. Rushing past the trees, she sprinted toward the road, but she could see the headlights of an oncoming car, the angry blare of its horn blaring like a warning. Ethan shouted, already halfway to the other side. In that moment, something shifted and fear gripped her insides. She couldn't allow herself to be dragged back into Daniel's control. She followed Ethan's voice, heart racing, adrenaline propelling her as she reached the road. But just as she leaped into the street, Daniel barreled behind her, hands outstretched. She felt his fingers graze her shoulder just as the car swerved. Time slowed, and the blaring horn seemed to echo through the air as the headlights illuminated the night. Then everything erupted into chaos as everything blurred around her. All she felt was the immediate grasp of fear and the rush of adrenaline as she dashed toward potential freedom. With a flash, she was thrown into the air, the force of the impact unearthing a whirlwind of emotions, a desperate fight for survival leading them into the unknown. And at that moment, she knew they were far from safe. Everything was spiraling into darkness, and they'd have to fight their way through, even when the outcome felt uncertain. In the midst of the struggle, they found themselves teetering on the edge, everything hanging in the balance, as danger loomed ever closer, leaving their fates suspended in the night. Who would emerge victorious? Only time would tell.